The reason I'm here is to talk about ignoring the impossible and a little bit of background on myself. I am known for running 52 marathons in 52 consecutive weekends. Back in 2006, I ran a marathon every single weekend for 1 calendar year. And that was kind of how I made my name in the running world and how I started ignoring the impossible. When people hear about my running events, the things that I've done, they automatically assume I've been running my entire life. And honestly, there could be nothing further from the truth. I grew up in a small town in northwestern Pennsylvania called Titusville. Titusville is known for two things, actually. It's the birthplace of the oil industry. The very first place a working oil well was drilled was in Titusville. The other thing that's known for sports fans is the Heisman Trophy. John Heisman went to my high school. So we're an old town. We're also a very small town. One thing that I grew up doing almost every day was swimming. I was a fairly good swimmer. And the only thing that I wanted to do was excel at swimming and get a varsity letter. The reason I wanted the varsity letter was not for the varsity letter, but was for this ugly brown corduroy hat that you would buy down at the local 5 and dime store that would say Titusville Rockets, which was our mascot. And when you got your varsity letter, you put whatever on your sport was on that hat. Now, anyone could get those hats, but no one would dare buy one until they had a varsity letter. So when I got that varsity letter, I wanted my mom to go down there and get me that hat. And she went downtown, bought it, brought it home, put it down on the table, and I tore it open so excitedly. And it said Titusville Rockets track and field. And I was like, Mom, you bought the wrong hat. She's like, oh, geez. She's like, well, I'll go back downtown and let me find the receipt. And she was laying this guilt trip on me about going back downtown. Titusville is about 1.2 square miles. Okay, there's no back downtown. This ship is about as big as Titusville is. But I didn't want to make her feel guilty about buying the wrong hat. So I said, well, keep the hat. I'll run track. So that's how my running career started. My mother bought the wrong hat. So I started running track. I ran the next year, my senior year of high school, and we were a phenomenal track team. There are 150 points that you can score in a Pennsylvania track meet between the two teams, and our closest meet the entire senior year was 101-49, and that was against our arch rival. Now, I was a fairly decent runner, but I saw myself as an outsider looking in, and I was like, wow, what an amazing team they are. And I kind of just like looked at the team as a whole and was like, wow, it's neat to be a part of this, but I observed it from the outside. When I graduated from high school, the one thing that I really wanted to do in life was to play collegiate football. I was a fairly good wide receiver. And 2 days before my freshman year of college, I was playing some backyard football with some friends and shattered my collarbone. So needless to say, my football career was on the hold, or even the thoughts of doing so. So for the next 2 years of college, I kind of like rehabbed that. Finally, my junior year, I decided to give it a shot. I went to Penn State, and they have a pretty good football team there, and so I thought, let's give this a shot. I had had some offers to play at smaller schools. Went to the football team, did the walk-on tryouts, which is basically tryouts for those who don't have a scholarship. Made it to the final cut before I got cut. Now, this basically means I didn't make it any further than the rest of you, but it sounds good on a resume as I made it to the final walk-on tryouts. Well, at the football tryouts, the rugby coach for Penn State had wisely positioned himself outside of the rejection room, as we like to call it, and as we filed on by, he asked us, hey, would you like to try out for rugby? He could have said, would you like to try out for badminton? And I would have said yes at that point, but I was like, sure, let's try out for rugby. I didn't realize that rugby was basically football without pads. Don't think I would have played if I had known that. Played for 2 years for Penn State's rugby team, and not unlike my high school track team, they were an amazingly good team. The 2 years I played, we were number 2 in the nation both years. But like my high school track team, I looked at them from an outside in, and I said, wow, look how good they are. And that was the thing about team sports, is that you always had to kind of rely on everyone else. And I didn't realize that till later, that that wasn't the kind of thing that I didn't like to do. So I graduated from college. I went on to grad school. I was studying law. And I'd put on a little weight when I was playing rugby. I'm 6'1", about 185 pounds. But when I was playing rugby, I weighed about 40 pounds more than this. Well, unfortunately, that didn't kind of stay muscle. It kind of turned to fat a little bit. And I was in law school, and I said, you know what, I want to lose this weight. What's the easiest way I know how to exercise? Well, swimming. Swimming's always been my fallback sport. But I thought, let's try to find a pool. Let's see if it fits into my schedule. And it was very difficult to find a time when I could swim, when the pool was open, that it fit into my schedule. Well, right then, a pretty cute girl in one of my law school classes went running by. And I was like, well, there you go. I can run. I'll ask her out on a date or something like that. That's a good way to flirt. So I went to class the next day, and I said to this girl who became my best friend in law school, I said, hey, Christy, would you like to go for a run? She's like, yeah, I'd love to. How about Saturday morning? I'm like, fantastic. Like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock? She's like, that's technically morning, but I was thinking like 6 o'clock. And I was like, you're thinking wrong. I was like, there's no way I'm getting up at 6. I think I finally pokered her down to about 7:30 or something like that, but that was the latest she could possibly think about running. Well, we started running, and I said, how far do you want to go? She's like, I was thinking around 5 or 6 miles, and I was like, my eyes must have gotten really wide. She's like, or we can do a little bit less. I didn't realize that Christy had qualified for and was training for the Boston Marathon. My first partner of running was someone who was exceedingly better than I was. Well, we went for that run, and it was fine. We went for a couple of more runs, and we started to gain, friendship and running camaraderie. And we decided I was going to do my first ever double-digit mile run, 10 miles. She's like, well, I'll pick you up. And I couldn't understand that because we always ran to wherever we were going to go. I don't know why she was going to pick me up, but I said, fine. She's like, I've got a route you'll like. So I got in the car, and she threw a bib number in my lap. And I said, what's this? She says, oh, it's for your half marathon that you're running today. I was like, it's for the what I'm doing when? And she's like, oh, I signed us up for a half marathon. I was like, that's insane. She's like, if you can do 10 miles, you can do 13. And she actually ended up being right. We ran together, ran the entire race together till the end, and then she said, you know what, you're feeling great, I can tell it, just take off. So I did, and I ran a fairly good first half marathon. I ran right around 8 minutes per mile for the half marathon. Well, we started running a little bit more together, and I said, you know what, if I'm going to be doing these 15, 16-mile training runs, I said, I'm going to sign up for a marathon. There's no way I want to run 17 miles for fun. That makes no sense to me. So I signed up for a marathon, but then my final year of law school kind of got in the way, and my training fell by the wayside. I had done one 16-mile training run, which if you've ever done a marathon or run long distance, you know that one 16-miler is not the appropriate way to train for running 26.2. But I thought, you know what, that's fine. I can run whatever I want. I was a collegiate athlete. I have no problem, taking over any challenges that had come in front of me. Got to the marathon morning. I had no idea what time I would like to run. I had an inkling about what I could do, but I thought, you know what, the world record's at 2:05. I'll run about an hour slower than that. I'll run a 3:05. That should be a piece of cake. Well, this shows my ignorance because if you run under 3 hours in a marathon, there are only about 2,000 or 3,000 people in America that run under 3 hours in a marathon every year. And here I am thinking, sure, why not? This should be a piece of cake. So I went out, I said, I'd heard that you would run even splits. That's the best way to handle that type of running. So I went out and I ran the first half right around an hour and a half. Perfect pacing, absolutely perfect. 1:29:50 something, and I wanted to run a 1:30. I was like, this is amazing. I feel this is 10 minutes faster than I ran that half marathon a couple of months ago, and I feel even better. I had started having these dreams of being on the cover of Runner's World magazine. Child prodigy comes out of nowhere, takes on the world. And I thought, you know what, if I can run like a 1:20 something for the second half, I can run like a 2:49 or faster for this marathon. That would be fantastic. Well, I did. I ran a 2:43 for the second half. Fell apart like you would not believe. Around mile 20, the wheels just fell off the wagon, as they say. My most embarrassing moment in my running career came about mile 22. I was running along, and a gentleman passed me, and he had one of those fuel belts on that you see all the time now, and the next aid station was in sight. It was like the other side of this room, and I could see the water and the bananas and everything, and as he ran past me, I begged him for a drink off of his fuel belt. I could see the next aid station, and I wanted something off of his. He turned around and he looked at me, and I must have looked so pathetic because he unhooked the fuel belt and handed it to me. He said, take it. I wasn't humble. I put that thing around my belt, around my waist, and I started drinking that the rest of the way. I found him at the end of the marathon, and I gave it back to him. Now, I've given this speech thousands of times, and I want someday for him to be in the audience so I can buy him a brand new fuel belt because I feel bad about how much I took that from him. But that's sort of a running camaraderie that I've learned is that people do that sort of thing, which I'll get to a little bit later. I finished that marathon, and I said, never again. And if you are a runner at all, you know how many times you've said never again. It usually doesn't mean never again. Well, it meant it to me, I thought. For the next 2 years, I barely ran. I ran a couple of times a week, did a 5K here and there, but I was like, I'm done. Marathoning is a very dumb thing to do. Who would want to run 26.2 miles for fun? Well, I graduated from law school. I got a job working for a judge in Erie, Pennsylvania. And he was a rather athletic gentleman, one of the youngest judges to ever been elected to the court. And he found my name using Google, and there are not that many Dane Rauschenbergs out there. In fact, there's one. It's me. And he found my Harrisburg Marathon result. And he said, Dane, I think you should run the Erie Marathon with me. And I said, thank you, Judge. I appreciate the offer, but I've done my marathon. He's like, no, I need a training partner. You're going to run it. And when my judge said things like, you will, it was like, you will or you're fired type stuff. So I realized, well, I guess I'm running the Erie Marathon with my judge. Well, we started training together a little bit. And then something came up and he wasn't able to run the race. So here I am signed up for a race that I didn't want to do, and I don't have a training partner. Well, I was like, well, I got to do it anyway. Well, I didn't run as fast as I wanted to the first time I ever ran a marathon, but I didn't do as poorly as I did the first time either. I ran a 3:29, so I knocked off 45 minutes off my marathon time. But I ran that 1:29 for the first half again, just like I did for the first race. So I'd done that perfect pacing per se, but I hadn't hit what I wanted to. Moved to Washington, D.C. I started working for a firm in D.C. while I was interviewing to be in the government agencies down there, and decided I got caught up in the Marine Corps marathon hoopla. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to do one more marathon. I'm going to do it right this time. I'm going to start doing the training workouts. I'm going to start working out with running clubs. I'm going to start learning the lingo. There's a word called fartlek, which is a Swedish word for speed play, which runners know by heart now. But when you first hear it, you kind of laugh a little bit, you know. Well, I knew I was a real runner because I no longer giggled at the word fartlek. That's how I knew I was a real runner. Did all these trainings in the heat and humidity of Washington, D.C. summers, disgusting, just you can feel it oppressive. And I was ready for this marathon, and I went out and I ran a 1:29, just like I did for the first 2 marathons I'd ever done. And I said, this is it. I can tell we're going sub 3. This is the one. Ran a 3:31. I actually ran slower than my previous marathon. And I said, maybe this marathoning thing isn't for me. I seem to do well at these half marathons, but they're, you know, maybe I should stick to that. You know, we find what you're good at in life, right? But I had signed up for another marathon 2.5 weeks later. I have no idea why I signed up for another marathon 2.5 weeks later. That makes no sense to me now, even looking back. But I remembered that I had another marathon to run. And the difference between this marathon and the Marine Corps marathon couldn't have been more vast. The Marine Corps marathon has about 500,000 spectators out on the course cheering you on, giving you that extrinsic energy. It's usually run when the weather is perfect for running. You've got the monuments in the background, and even if you live in Washington, D.C., for some reason on race day, those monuments are cleaner and taller and brighter. This marathon in the middle of the woods of Maryland had about 19 spectators cheering you on. There were more deer, more geese, more wildlife out there than there were humans. The race was freezing cold. It was 27 degrees at the start of the race. The race was a difficult course in and of itself. There was a lot of up and down undulation of hills. There was some black ice on the trail, so you were slipping and sliding a lot. Everything boded poorly for me going into this race. Yet somehow I ran my fastest time by 10 minutes. And this is like, well, maybe I shouldn't give up marathoning yet. Let me try another one. A friend of mine was running a marathon 6 weeks later in Phoenix, Arizona. I said, let me come out and join you. I went out there with no goal in mind, dropped another 10 minutes, and qualified for Boston myself. I was like, well, let's keep going. I said, this is a great way to see the country. My brother lives in Tampa. I haven't seen him in a couple of years. Let me fly down there and run the Tampa Marathon. Well, my brother said, listen, this is kind of crazy, all these runs you're doing. I think you should do something else. He's like, I want you to come down and see me, but do this other challenge they have instead. And I said, well, what's that? He says, you run a 15K or 3.1 miles at 6:30 in the morning. 2 hours later, you run a 15K, which is 9.3 miles. And then the next day, you run a marathon. And what they do is they combined all the times, and the person who runs the slowest amount of time is the winner of this event. And for some reason, that seemed to make more sense than just running the marathon by itself. I have no idea how he convinced me that this was an easier thing, but I bit into it. Well, I ran the 5K and the 15K the day before in what amounted to personal best time.